Everything the light touches is our kingdom.
So it's 1991, and the Disney Animation Studio is pumping all of its top talent into its next animated film.
You said you'd always be there for me!
Backed by the talents of legendary animator Glenn Keane and composer Alan Menken, it was a film that was destined to be...
It's a home run, right? It's a classic in the making.
We are all connected in the great circle of life.
And that film was Pocahontas.
Whoa, time out. Let me get this straight.
There was actually a famous meeting that we had with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and he got up in front of everybody and he said, Pocahontas, it's a home run, right? It's a West Side Story meets Dances with Wolves.
But when it came to The Lion King, which was being made simultaneously within the studio, they didn't exactly have the same level of confidence.
Believe it or not, people didn't really believe in the movie. There was a kind of a general sense that the movie was sort of a B movie. It's an experiment. But we should do these things. It's good for the studio to have these, to take chances, to take risks.
Like it being the first Disney animated feature not based on existing IP.
I was writing this memo about how The Lion King follows the story of a hero's journey, and then I realized that, not really.
Lion King was unique in that it was completely out of thin air.
And while Disney really liked the direction the film was heading in, they certainly didn't do it any favors.
Pity. Why not?
When production started in November of 1990, the team was given
dog of a movie. It didn't have any music. Scar was a baboon. It was a war between lions and baboons.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
This meant the script would have to be totally redone, and when you combine this with the film being given to first-time directors Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff, the production was in dire need of top animation talent. But with Pocahontas just on the horizon, that turned out to be impossible.
Pretty much everybody at the studio decided they didn't want to work on Lion King. Everybody decided that they'd rather work on Pocahontas.
Can you paint with all the colors of the wind?
And then we literally had to beg and scrape.
Would you please animate on our movie?
Yeah.
While this meant the animators who stayed on the project were passionate about the concept, like legendary villain animator Andreas Deja, it also meant that with two films in production at the same time, they suddenly had a large number of roles to fill.
And so what happened was a lot of younger guys got an opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise. A lot of younger guys stepped up into these jobs of responsibility.
And while it initially seemed like this would doom the film, these unseasoned animators weren't about to let this film and their opportunity fall by the wayside.
So we're the guys that decided, for whatever reason, to stay on the B movie, and we thought, we can make something of this. And there was that little chip on our shoulder that we could prove ourselves in some way.
Hey, why don't you pick on somebody your own size?
And the best way to do that is to attempt things the studio had never done before. And since so much of the department was focused on Pocahontas, and they had already wrote off the film as an experiment, it turned out to be a perfect fit.
We were allowed to do things that none of these other movies could do. We were allowed to experiment. We were allowed to take chances.
Dad, we gotta go home.
This freedom allowed the team to brainstorm endless possibilities, and with this passionate team of animators, combined with these up-and-comers with something to prove, the team suddenly found themselves with a film so rich in details that the visuals alone could tell the story.
One of the really fascinating things about animation is that absolutely everything about the film tells a story.
Take Scar, the film's primary villain.
Life's not fair, is it?
Andreas Deja designed the character's appearance after watching Jeremy Irons act and listening to his voice.
You're so weird.
You have no idea.
I went into the director's room and I said, you guys, when I listened to those early tracks by Jeremy Irons, I was just closing my eyes and there's something that just happened. I could see it. I could see it and I could feel it.
I despise guessing games.
Just look at real lions, look at Jeremy Irons, and let that sort of influence you.
But beyond his appearance, he wanted to use the character's physical traits to illustrate his constant scheming and antagonistic qualities. So he not only drew him to be more slippery in contrast with Mufasa, but he also kept his claws permanently unsheathed, something noticeably absent from the other characters and giving an innocent scene like this a malicious undertone.
I'm your only nephew.
He also created an association between the character and the color green, which is commonly used to represent envy.
Color actually is a storytelling device that is used to create emotion, to create meaning.
That meant having the color surround him during his song Be Prepared, where he expresses his true desire to kill his brother and his nephew and take the throne.
No, fool, we're gonna kill him. And Simba, too.
It also meant changing his eye color to green, since he could never escape his own envy even after he ultimately succeeded in his goal.
I'm 10 times the king Mufasa was.
Then there's the character's actions, shown to us at the very beginning of the film.
Didn't your mother ever tell you not to play with your food?
Which ultimately foreshadows how he'll be defeated.
Run away and never return.
But it wasn't just the character's physical traits. Even without knowing the plot, the lighting alone informs us of Scar's villainy.
There's a neat lighting thing going on here too, because whenever you see young Simba, he's out in the sunlight and looking out over the vast Pride Lands, and then whenever you see Scar, he's under the overhang of the cliff.
This same technique appears later in the film when Mufasa is engulfed in Scar's shadow as he finally reveals his true intentions.
Long live the king.
But these details aren't just tied to one character or even one scene. The film is full of motifs that help create parallels between the characters and different halves of the film, like the sun setting on Mufasa's death.
One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here.
And not rising again until Simba takes the throne.
And will rise with you as the new king.
Or the movement of the background as Mufasa and Simba face mortal danger.
Now this scene is interesting because, like many other moments in the film, it sets up a parallel to exactly the geography and the scenes where Mufasa and Scar were interacting back in the Stampede. In fact, the fire down below, the lightning's now set the whole Pride Lands ablaze, and the fire is moving left to right, just like the wildebeest stampede was moving left to right. So you really create a lot of visual image.
This same emphasis on directional movement occurs immediately after Mufasa's death, when Simba runs left to right through a tangled clump of vines, symbolizing the suppression of his recent trauma.
What'd you do, kid?
Something terrible, but I don't want to talk about it.
But right before Simba decides to return home, he runs through another clump of vines, representing him weaving through his subconscious to get to the center of his problem. Only this time, he moves right to left.
One of the scenes is exactly the same. That there's a vine. Yeah, there's a crawling under one big vine, which is exactly the same.
Stop!
But the visual impact of the film wasn't the only thing that came from the film taking risks. Up to this point, every film in the Disney Renaissance had been scored by Alan Menken, but with him busy on Pocahontas, the team had to take another chance and bring in someone from outside the Disney scope. And so, they went after composer Hans Zimmer.
I thought, oh, it's a Disney animated film, so it'll be like Fairy Tale Princess, and I kept saying, I don't know how to write Fairy Tale Princess music, and they kept saying, that's why we want you.
They knew the score was going to be darker compared to their previous films, and they needed someone who could capture the mature themes they were expressing, and he turned out to be the man for the job.
My father died when I was very young, and I had one of those crazy moments where I realized I had to actually now deal with it in this movie, because the only way you can write music is you have to write it from the heart. I don't know any other way of doing it. I don't think there's any technique really.
And similar to his work on Dune, he wanted to start the film by immediately throwing the audience into a foreign place. But this time, he'd have to work with the other musician the team brought in to help.
Well, when the whole thing started, they in fact said to me, who would you like to write the music? And Alan Menken is working already on Aladdin and is very busy, so who would you like? And I said, well, Elton John, but you won't get him. I said, you haven't to hope, he'll be too busy. And to my amazement, they said, well, we'll ring him up.
So when you combine Elton John's lyrics, which were
written on an afternoon up in Oxford Street,
and Hans Zimmer's score,
it was his idea to put the African feel in Circle of Life, and it's really made a difference to the start and the opening of the movie. It fits in beautifully.
You suddenly get one of the most memorable openings in film history. The Lion King is a film that I loved as a kid, but couldn't really understand why until I got older.
I know what I have to do, but going back means I'll have to face my past.
It was a passion project from a group determined not to be labeled the B Team, who turned every would-be disadvantage into something special.
The Evening Star was to go work at Disney and make pictures that sang and moved people and made people laugh. And when you're in it, you're just trying to do the best you can. It's hard. it's really hard. Everyone's working really hard and you're working long hours, but people are laughing. And I always felt like there was such spirit. And then we wound up making these movies, which are just so beautiful.
I'm not the one who's confused. You don't even know who you are.
I'm Luke.
Well, forgive me for not leaping for joy. Bad back, you know.
Thanks for watching.
You're just not looking hard enough.
It's over. There is nothing left.